Session of the Troy Planning Commission. This Planning Commission consists of 9 residents of the City of Troy who are appointed by the Mayor and confirmed by City Council. Attending tonight's meeting with us is our planning consultant, our staff, and our City Attorney. At the appropriate time, anyone wishing to speak to the Planning Commission should sign at the podium. Identify yourself and tell us your concern. If you've got any communication device with you, please put it on vibrate or turn it off. And with that, Kathy, can we have the roll call, please? Brent?
Mr. Edmonds.
Here.
Mr. Hudson.
Here.
Mr. Krent.
Here.
Mr. Maxwell. Mr. Sanzika.
Here.
Mr. Schultz.
Here.
Mr. Stratt.
Here.
Mr. Tagle.
Here.
Mr. Ullman.
Here. We have a quorum. You've all been submitted a copy of our agenda. Does anybody have any additions or corrections to it, or can we approve it as submitted?
Move it as submitted.
Mr. Schultz moves, second by Mr. Tagle. Brent, roll call, please.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Mr. Sanzika.
Yes.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes.
Mr. Stratt.
Yes.
Mr. Tagle.
Yes.
Mr. Ullman.
Yes.
Mr. Edmonds.
Yes.
The agenda is approved. The next item is the approval of the minutes of the May 24th, 2011 special study meeting. Mr. Sanzika?
So move.
Mr. Edmonds? Second. Brent, roll call, please.
Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Mr. Sanzika.
Yes.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes.
Mr. Stratt.
Yes.
Mr. Tagle.
Yes.
Mr. Ullman.
Yes.
Mr. Edmonds.
Yes.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes. Item 4 is for public comments. This is for items which are not on the agenda tonight. Does anybody wish to address us for an item not on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we'll go to a postponed item, which is item number 5 on our agenda. Preliminary site plan review, file number SP186-A. The proposed Sunset Plaza CVS Pharmacy drive-through at the northeast corner of Long Lake and Livernois, specifically 125 East Long Lake, Section 10, which is currently zoned Neighborhood Node M District and is controlled by a consent judgment, which means that the Commission tonight can only make a recommendation to City Council. The final approval or denial of this preliminary site plan will be up to Troy City Council. With that, Brent, or is it Zach? Zach, could you give us a review, please?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your digital packet is a copy of my June 10th, 2011 memorandum, which was prepared as a result of a revised submittal that the applicant provided to the city in response to our conversation with them a couple of weeks ago, as you'll recall. There was a few issues. I'll just refresh your memory and refresh your memory of those in the audience. We had some concerns with regard to the island separating the drive lanes from the maneuvering lane. We had a concern with regard to screening to the property to the east. We had a concern with regard to the location of the barrier-free spaces and a few general other site plan related comments, but those were the big ones. What the applicant's done is prepared a revision that addresses the majority of those concerns. You'll see on your site plan that they've added a 4-space, or what equates to about 4 spaces wide landscaped area that's immediately to the east of the proposed drive-through, and in that landscaped area is landscaping that's largely in compliance with what our screening requirements for the screening treatment 3 in our new ordinance call for. They've also put curb and gutter on that island that separates the maneuvering lane from the drive-through lanes. And in that landscaped island now they have a row of shrubs, which you'll recall there was the conversation about multi-lane drive-throughs being visible from a right-of-way. They're traditionally supposed to be located in the least visible part of a site. We talked a lot about the site constraints here and the fact that there aren't too many alternative locations to add this feature. What they've done is they've put a row of shrubs in there in response to the Planning Commission's request. And they've extended that island, in addition to making it a true curb and gutter island, they've extended it a little bit further to the west, and now they've added 1 car in each lane. So there's 4-car capacity, which is our traditional requirement, and a 3-car capacity for the southern lane. So there's 7 stacking spaces within those lanes, fully out of the maneuvering lane. Yeah, Brent, could you go back to that last screen? This is you can see right here everything that's in there. The barrier-free spaces are still located basically where we had talked about not desiring them to be located. They're so close to the entrance to the drive-through. We do understand that there's some site constraints there in terms of the ramp or the desired ramp design. You can see that there's a striped area between those 2 barrier-free spaces, and the ramp is at the north end of it between the 2. If they were to, and the applicant, I believe, is going to show you some, alternatives where they tried to figure out moving the barrier-free spaces. If they move it to the west side, you can see that the sidewalk along the west facade is much shallower than that on the south facade, and so it made that design of barrier-free ramp difficult to put in there without interrupting the sidewalk. Whether or not there are alternative solutions we can discuss later, but the barrier-free spaces, as you can see, are still located along the south line there, although ultimately we would have preferred them to be somewhere else. This drawing shows you a good example of the landscape island on the east facade there. They chose to make it approximately 4 parking spaces wide. It does provide a little bit of an additional barrier there from the cars that are exiting, heading eastbound out of the drive-through lanes. Facing the houses there, they have 4 trees, which the requirement is 1 tree or 1 tall tree, I believe, for every 10 linear feet, and so they've got that. And they have I believe just 3 of the smaller trees. Actually, you'd probably require more like 5 or 6 if you were to do the actual screening treatment 3. But that would be if you were holding to that in lieu of the wall. Remember, there is also a wall here. So, I believe that the approach that they've taken, I'm comfortable with it, and I believe it meets with our standards that we would have accepted were this to come to us for the first time. And also, I like the placement of it. I think it's well executed, and it serves sort of as a, like a parking lot island barrier going into those spaces that are behind the building there. So it separates that from that. The last outstanding element that is sort of the bigger one is that the applicant is working with the city. You can ask them about this, but the applicant is working with the city with regards to the water main location. Regardless of the action that the Planning Commission takes tonight, there is a water main easement through this area. They're not permitted to construct in that water main easement. So even if we were to approve it and not address the water main easement at all, they wouldn't be able to move forward unless they would work with the engineering department to relocate the easement there, or the water main itself, and of course, obviously, the easement that goes along with it. So while that is obviously something we need to be concerned about, the project is dead in the water if they don't move the water main as far as approval from final site plan approval, because the engineering department is not going to sign off on it unless that issue is addressed. So I'm comfortable with them moving forward with, without a formal solution on the books here on this site plan. The applicant's well aware of it, the city's well aware of it, and the cover and all this wouldn't be constructed without addressing that with the engineering department. Unless there are any other questions, I believe that addresses everything in my review.
Thank you. Any questions from the panel? None. Is the petitioner present? Yes, sir. Why don't you come forward, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Planning Commission. My name is John Gaber. I'm an attorney on behalf of CVS, excuse me, for this project. And with me I have John Polsinelli, who is our architect, who wasn't able to be at the last meeting, but can really illuminate this issue about the barrier-free spaces. And then we have Mr. Paul Chosid back here, too, who is our landlord and the owner of the shopping center, should there be any questions for him. I just want to say briefly before I turn the floor over to our architect to address the barrier-free issue that when we were here last time, we had thought that we would be able to relocate those spaces to the west side. That was before the architect got a hold of it and they looked at the plans and the dimensions and such. And in the process of that, we came up with some impediments to doing that. We've tried to accommodate all the other requests of the Planning Commission and staff to make this a viable project and acceptable to the Planning Commission and the city. Hopefully we've done that. And the final item is with respect to the water main easement, the relocation. We're fine if you leave that as a condition on your approval. Obviously, as Zach has said, that needs to be accomplished, and we certainly are willing to do that. So with that, I'd like to turn the floor over to our architect to show you the scenarios of what we looked at in terms of moving those barrier-free spaces and what the impediments are.
All right, why don't you bring them forward?
Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Like John mentioned, we explored the idea based on the last meeting comments to move the accessible spots to the west side of the building. Once we did that and we looked at it and provided the hatched area for the ramp area, we noticed that this would create a hazard as you exited the existing CVS stores. With the new ADA laws, we need to have the accessible spots as close as possible to the exterior doors. the last thing we wanted to do is create an inconvenience or an area where individuals could get hurt. So we decided to, as we extended the drive-through lane over, that allowed us the opportunity to keep the accessible spots in a similar location, just moved over a little bit. And what that does, as you see in, is it possible to get to the second option? Okay, perfect. What that does allow us to, it creates a ramp in the proper location between the two accessible spots, and it doesn't interfere with the existing doors and won't create any hazard whatsoever. Based on the amount of cars that go through the drive-through lane for drop-off or pickup, we do not feel that it'll be a hazard at all if people are pulling in and out of those ADA spots. So to that, I don't know if you have any questions at all, or...
Mr. Chairman, can I add a couple of points, please?
Sure.
Thank you very much. Just want to make it clear that in option number one, we that would have been our preference, and we looked at doing that. However, given that location of that ramp, you've got a difficult situation for any wheelchair patrons who are trying to access that ramp to come into the entrance and the exit doors, particularly with other patrons walking in or out of those doors. The other downside in doing that is you've got a depression then in the sidewalk where people coming out, exiting the store, turning right are going to have to walk through this area, this depression where the ramp is, to walk further along that sidewalk to get to their cars. So it creates an inherently dangerous situation from a pedestrian standpoint. The other point I'd like to mention is I believe I mentioned last time when I showed you those graphs of the traffic counts for the drive-through. What we're talking about for the drive-through during the peak hours of use is probably 8 or 9 cars per hour. So I don't think that's a substantial number of cars. And if you look at what's currently there right now, you've got 11 regular parking spaces that are being taken out. So when you talk about conflicts and traffic movement, right now you've got people coming in that drive aisle to the south, and they're turning in and out of those existing parking spaces to use those as parking, and because those are among the closest spaces to the store. So you have the same movement now that essentially that you would have there. I can't say whether the volumes are greater now under the current situation than they will be, but they won't be substantial with the drive-through situation. So with that, we're certainly open to questions to discuss this, but I just wanted to shed a little more light onto the rationale for going with option 2 instead of option number 1.
Thank you. Any questions of the petitioner or the architect? Thank you. I guess not. We'll bring it back to the board. What's your pleasure? Mr. Schultz.
I just have a comment, and if these gentlemen want to respond, that's fine. I applaud the landscape area and the screening of the actual drive-through. My concern is Emerald Arborvitae, I would bet that after the first winter season will be gone and they'll never be replaced. They aren't terribly salt hardy. And the other thing is, unless those 2 islands are irrigated, the trees that are in them are just going to die. Those are my comments.
Okay. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, over here. Yes, in the gallery.
You got to stand up.
I really don't think it's absolutely necessary that you have to have that handicap facility right at the front door. I really think that it's as close as possible, as close as convenient and possible or practical. And it can be directly across to the next island so that they have to walk across the street. They're not actually right at the sidewalk, but as indicated, there are very few cars that are going to be pulling through there, so it's not a safety situation. But to me, that is a hazardous situation to have the parking where it's at right now. It is a dangerous situation, not only for the people that are walking there, but I really don't like it at that location.
Anyone else? Mr. Kemp.
Well, the focus is the handicap parking, and I have a 92-year-old mother that I have to hand walk. She's a handicap, And I've looked at this very carefully, both putting it on the west side or the south side. I think the west side is a problem for pedestrians walking on the sidewalk. I understand the situation there. Although I agree with Mr. Stratt on many occasions, I think keeping it where it is more beneficial to people that are really handicapped. I know my mother can only walk about 30 feet before she stops and has to take a breath. And for her to walk, she would stop in the middle of that traffic lane to take a breath and then continue on another 30 feet. I think leaving it where you've located in the not the option one, the one I see in front of me, which is, I guess, option 2, I think is the better of the solutions. It's not a perfect solution. Obviously, the perfect solution to me would be to have it on the west side, but then again, there's a ramp problem there if we just don't have the sidewalk space to do it properly. So I'm willing to go ahead and approve it as it is on this option 2.
Anyone else? Any comments? Are we ready for a resolution? Mr. Olston?
If I could just respond,
Yes.
Mr. Stratt. The CVS directive, they are involved with significant lawsuits which are requiring per ADA to move the spots closest to their front door. They've had spots further away, and then with the new legislation, they are requiring we are retrofitting many CVSs to make sure that the spots are closest to the front door. So I just want to make that clear. It's part of the ADA.
The concern I have is you have a 15'6" depth on this, and that is really shallow. So part of the car is going to be sticking out into that portion in addition to the drive-through trying to go through that. So even if you count the overhang, you still have the potential that you're sticking out beyond that point. That is really cramping as much as you can, and it's a dangerous situation. But if the board wishes, that's fine with me. I'm not happy with it, is what I'm saying.
Thank you. Mr. Edmonds?
Does the 15'6" meet our standard, Mr. Savinet,
No,
depth?
no.
I'm looking, I can't see on the plan where it says 15'6". 1 second.
It's right here. It's right here.
What sheet?
10 and a half, actually.
It actually is, our standard would actually in that instance be 17 feet.
Isn't it 18 plus a 2-foot
No,
overhang?
17.
It is 17?
17 if you've got at least a 7-foot sidewalk and allow for 2-foot overhang to make 19.
Okay.
What let me see here, just a second, if I can look. The 15 feet 10 goes to that back of curb. They have the striping for the space coming all the way out to the required distance, although the curb stops short on the outsides of it. You can see where that striping does. But, I mean, you're correct, Mr. Stratt, in saying that there's the potential for the car to stick out another, 1.5 to 2 feet from where the actual curbed island part of the drive-through stops. You can see the striping, though, between the two spaces indicates that the space goes a little bit further beyond there. I believe, although I don't have it here, that there was still sufficient maneuvering lane. What I was looking for was a maneuvering lane width, and as long as it was compliant between the bottom of that striped area indicating the end of the parking spaces and then the required maneuvering lane width before the other spaces start. And that's where the old spaces were, and I believe that it's compliant across there so that there is sufficient circulation space there. So ideally, I guess, ideally what you could do is bring that curb out a little bit further to match the end of the actual parking space. So, possibly, just adding the 2 feet of additional teardrop at the bottom of the curbing on the right, and then the curbing on the left. If the planning commission is concerned about that, we could discuss it with the applicant, and then that would make that, the entirety of that space where the curb ends would indicate the end of the space and not the striping. Either way, there's sufficient maneuvering lane width there and stuff, so it's, it would be okay. Maybe the applicant would like to respond, I don't know.
And just to clarify, the requirement is for 17 feet for the parking space.
Yeah.
There's no actual requirement for the island itself, but logic would dictate that you want the island designed to somewhat define and protect the parking space. But the standard applies to the length of the parking space itself. I just want to clarify that.
Well, I agree with you, except for one thing. the possibility of a van being there. Could be a larger vehicle, which could actually extend out, which is, you know, the possibility. That's what you have to do, is you have to provide for van accessibility as well. So I'm just, again, I agree with the possibility that was just explained, is maybe extend the curbs out. If you're insisting on putting it there, then at least extend the curbs out, if there is enough space for a maneuvering lane. If there is enough, that 24-foot maneuvering lane is clear. I don't know that, but because I'm looking at a survey, it doesn't indicate anything on the drawings of that.
Yeah, I'm not...
I don't disagree with the suggestion. I just wanted to clarify my comment was related to the length of a parking space, not the length of the island itself.
Right.
Are we ready for a resolution?
Just one more comment, please.
Yes.
Regarding that, bringing those curbs out further, again, if it's a large vehicle like a van, their turning radius is not as small as a car, and I'm a little bit leery about extending them out and then having a van jump the curbs every time it tries to get into that tight spot. So I would be more in favor, if you want to define that 17-foot coming back, I would actually move the island next to the drive-in with all that shrubbery on it, move that southward slightly, if it doesn't impact the maneuverability of the 24-foot aisle of lane. But that would clearly, that would help define for a driver's line of sight to say this, that maneuvering, that east-west aisle is cramped more, it's pushed down more from the north down to the south a little bit. But again, I would be really leery about bringing those two curbs out again, because I think bigger vehicles might be ending up jumping the curb just to get into that parking spot. That's it.
If I can build on that a little bit. You can see on sheet SP2, the second sheet of your plans, this is what I was looking at. You can see where the existing striping, the existing parking spaces extend to the limits of where the striping for these barrier-free spaces are, and that reserves the maneuvering lane right along there. So you can see the compliance spaces that exist there now. See how the dotted lines go a little bit past the shaded area? I'm talking about the drawing on the top, the enlarged, the demolition site plan. So if you look at the shadowing on there, you can see the shaded areas are the existing concrete to be demolished, and where things are going to go in, that's where the existing and the proposed are over top of it. So you can see like the barrier-free spaces where they exist now, you can see they extend a couple of feet past the existing curb. And if you look all the way around to the right, probably in response to the kind of situation that Mr. Krent is talking about, the existing curb on the extreme east of this line of parking does the same thing as the one they propose now. See, it stops short of the actual length of the parking space there. The landscape island stops short. And that could possibly be for maneuvering in that. I don't know, but what they've proposed here is that their new barrier-free spaces would basically meet the existing curb line there, and but the striping, just like the existing striping now, would extend a couple of feet past that. So there is sufficient space for the maneuvering. There is sufficient space for the depth of the parking space. You're kind of both right. I mean, it's there is sufficient space for it. It meets the standard in terms of depth. We don't have a requirement on our ordinance that says that landscape islands or curb are mandatorily, located at the end of that space. But given that we have a situation where we have the barrier-free spaces right next to the ramp, or the drive-through lanes and that, I think the discussion with the applicant, the Planning Commission's pleasure, either would be acceptable.
Gentlemen?
I'll go.
Mr. Schultz.
Resolved that the Planning Commission hereby recommends that preliminary site plan approval pursuant to Article 8 of the zoning ordinance as requested for the proposed Sunset Plaza CVS Pharmacy drive-through located on the northeast corner of Long Lake and Livernois, 125 East Long Lake in Section 10 within the neighborhood node form-based zoning district controlled by a consent judgment be granted subject to the following conditions. 1, relocate existing water main and provide a new easement and abandon existing easement. And I'm going to see if this flies. Arborvitae to be replaced with a more street-hardy species to be approved, administratively approved by the planning department, and that both landscape islands shall be irrigated.
Is there support?
Support.
Mr. Edmonds?
Could I add one more condition?
Well, no, you've got to move to amend apparently.
Can I move to amend?
Yes.
I'd like to add one more condition, and I may not get support, but that's to make the width of the island near the drive-in, whatever the dimension is, to extend it out to where the existing end of that 17-foot, the old parking spaces are. That would be basically adding maybe a foot or two to the south of that southern edge of that island by the drive-through. Again, to just delineate for the driver coming through that they're to stay away from those handicap parking places a little more.
Is there support for the amendment?
I'll support it.
Mr. Stratt? Any discussion on the amendment?
I'll support it.
No, I say, is there any discussion on the amendment? If not, let's call for a vote on the amendment. Mr. Sevenant?
Mr. Sanzika? Yes. Mr. Schultz?
No.
Mr. Stratt?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Ullman?
Yes.
Mr. Edmonds?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
No. The amendment,
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
the amendment passes. The main motion is on the floor. As amended. Thank you. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Sanzika?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
Mr. Stratt?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Ullman?
Yes.
Mr. Edmonds?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
No.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Motion passes, and I'll tell you that I voted no because I believe the best spot is on the west side for those handicap spots. They can be located close enough to the entrance where I don't think it's going to make a significant difference where they're presently located. That being done, your site plan is being recommended to City Council.
Thank you very much.
Item number 6, special use request. This is a public hearing and a preliminary site plan review on file number SU 388. A proposed adult foster care home north side of Square Lake, east of Beach, 2420 West Square Lake Road. Section 6, currently zoned R1A, which is one family residential district. Mr. Brannigan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an existing facility in town that currently operates as an adult foster care family home. You'll recall during our extensive discussions of the zoning ordinance even just 3, 4, 5 months ago on this topic, a family home is that which is permitted by right, by law in all districts, not just in Troy, but throughout the state of Michigan. And those are facilities that have 6 or less residents. They can be in single-family residential areas permitted by right. That is the case with the current facility. What's happened in this situation is that the applicant improved his facility with approval from the City of Troy Building Department to add additional bedrooms, converted the garage area to additional bedrooms, and therefore now has capacity for a number of residents that would exceed 6. There's 7 bedrooms in the facility as it stands now, although they have not been issued a certificate of occupancy because once it was discovered the additional capacity was being put in place to basically convert it to a facility that could have more than 6 homes. It was discovered, obviously, that they would need a special land use permit because what is now a small group home, which is 7 to 12, is permitted only by special use in this district, in all our single-family residential districts. Consequently, we have a situation where the facility is improved and everything is in place and constructed. However, they don't have a certificate of occupancy for the number of residents to fill all those rooms. I'm sure from looking at the site plan, you're familiar with what's going on. It's a single-family home. It's a wooded site, moderately wooded site. It's right near the freeway on Square Lake Road. And you can see there's an existing driveway that comes in. They show a couple of cars there. You could easily have capacity to park several more cars in and out of that space. But our parking requirements only call for parking for the shift of workers that could possibly be working at the facility. And they have an area on the east of the building there where I'll talk about in a minute, where we had observed some dumpster, trash containers and rubbish, things of that nature. But Basically, that area where the drive-through ends is where the improvements were made, and now there's a couple of bedrooms there. So as a result of that situation, this is what we're left with. On the exterior, the site really hasn't changed and doesn't change, if you've been out there or seen it, it doesn't change as a result of this application at all. Where there once was a garage, there's now a couple of windows, and it is what it is. Given the limited nature of the request, I'm really just going to talk about compliance with the special use permit requirements for this type of facility, and we'll talk about all the elements with regard to the specific use standard. In the new ordinance and in the old ordinance, we would isolate certain uses that have special characteristics or characteristics that need to be fully vetted for when they're considered for a special use permit. Adult foster care, small group homes do have a series of these requirements, and I'm going to go through them now. A site plan prepared in accordance with Article 8 has to be required and submitted. So in this case, it has been submitted. The subject parcel has to meet minimum lot area requirements for the zoning district in which it's located, provided there's a minimum site area of 4,000 square feet per adult, including employees and/or caregivers. There is an issue in this site because it's on the site plan drawing, they identify incorrectly, that, oh, well, based on a 2,000 square foot requirement, we could have, what they say in there, 20 residents. Well, clearly they can't have 20 residents. First of all, that doesn't comply with what a small group home is. Second of all, the requirement is 4,000 square feet. And third of all, they don't have 40,000 square feet, which the math would work out to. They are actually just shy of 40,000 square feet. However, our ordinance doesn't say almost 4,000, or it says 4,000 square feet per resident. But it falls extraordinarily close. It's 39,988 square feet. Were the site 12 additional square feet larger, you would have capacity for an additional resident. All that being said, the calculation is 4,000 square feet. It is under 40,000 square feet. Our calculations indicate that you could have up to 9 on the site based on this. There's only 7 bedrooms and then the caregivers, so the math does work out. However, if we were to get a revised site plan, I'd like those notes removed and a condition of any approval from the Planning Commission being made to limit it to, those that are the number of residents that would be permitted by ordinance, which would be 9. The property is maintained in a manner that is consistent with the character of the neighborhood. I believe largely that it is. It's, when you go out there, it's a single-family home on a large lot. It's a rather large single-family home. There are other similar size single-family homes in the area. It doesn't have the garage door anymore, but I mean, it looks like a house, really. The one thing that I would say that is slightly uncharacteristic of a single-family home is that given that they have, a few more people living there than you would in a traditional home probably, they have additional rubbish containers, like wheeled carts. And then there was, I observed a lot of boxes and things, and they were stacked up. They were neatly. I wouldn't say that it was trash strewn or anything, but, they were all, because they don't have a garage now, we're on the east facade of the building, kind of lined up along the wall there. That's the most visible part of the site. I would suggest that we discuss with the applicant the possibility of putting up just a simple fence there or just something to screen that area, a pen, of some kind. Even a 12-foot section of vinyl fence would be sufficient in my, in my estimation to screen that. The parking, as I indicated, one off-street parking space per employee and our caregiver is provided. There's space for 2 spaces, so that's no problem. Appropriate licenses with the state of Michigan must be maintained. It's our understanding they're operating under an existing license. They do have approval to get the larger license, but it's always contingent upon local approvals. They haven't gotten a certificate of occupancy, so consequently, they can only be permitted once the city of Troy would ultimately permit them to have that. But they are compliant with our requirements anyway, should they ultimately achieve their permit. Now, the new standards in the zoning ordinance for general standards for any use established as a special land use are as follows. Compatibility with adjacent uses. This is the harmonious with the existing neighborhood requirement. This is from our old ordinance as well. The use is proposed within an existing foster care facility. We don't have any, extensive records of complaints about anything going on at this facility to our knowledge. The site is indistinguishable from a large single-family home with the exception of possibly the additional wheeled containers and that I mentioned. We believe that it can remain harmonious with the character of the area. Compatibility with the master plan. This is a use permitted in this district. This site is appropriately zoned. I believe there's no issue with the master plan. It calls for the area to remain single-family. This is typical in a single-family district. Traffic impact. The use may create several additional vehicle trips per day if you had a couple more residents and people, somebody visiting them every single day, but not something that's uncharacteristic of a single-family home, not to mention that this is the first lot immediately off of Square Lake Road, so I don't believe that it would have any additional traffic impact to the neighborhood. Impact on public services, there's no additional impact for any typical use permitted in the R1A here. That's why we permit them in these districts. Does it comply with ordinance standards? Yes, it does. Should the request be approved, we believe it will comply with ordinance standards. It already does as it stands now. I don't believe there'll be any issue there. Impact on the overall environment, to a degree any higher than any other permitted use in the district or the use that's already there, 2 additional residents or whatever it might be, is not going to cause any drastic change in the existence of this use. It will not have a detrimental effect on the environment, particularly should we do something about the rubbish location. Specific use approval requirements, does it meet its own standards? As I indicated, the square footage calculations on the page are incorrect. I would say that we could satisfy this requirement if the Planning Commission, were they to vote in the affirmative, would place a limitation in the form of a condition on the approval to no more than 9 residents, or no more than 9 residents on the site, that's caregivers and residents, and the trash area be obscured by a fence or landscaping, and then the specific use standards would be satisfied. There are a few other things according to 9.03B that the Planning Commission must consider: nature and character of activities, vehicular circulation, outdoor activity, hours of operation. This is not a commercial facility, it's not retail or anything, and then the standards for the specific use address the concerns that are these additional areas of consideration. So I believe that it's such a location and character to be compatible with the orderly development of the area should it be executed in the way that we've just discussed. So we generally support the applicant's request. It's a successful, viable foster care facility. It was permitted by the city to add these 2 additional rooms. We have this situation now, I believe, with these couple of amendments that I discussed, that it should be approvable, and we would recommend that the Planning Commission approve the facility.
Any questions of Mr. Brannigan? Seeing none, is the petitioner present?
Good evening. Excuse me. My name is Nathan Robinson with Horizon Engineering, here representing the owners, the Goikas. Mr. Brannigan, pretty much his presentation touched on every detail of the proposal. I really have nothing to add, but I will just touch base on 3 of the proposed conditions of the approval. We have no problem installing a fence to screen the trash area. Actually, that was the intent of the owners to do that at some point. So that fits perfectly with what they plan to do anyways. The condition with the 9 residents is fine. There's no problem there. We can certainly turn in a revised site plan with the numbers and site criteria corrected for the calculation to determine the number of residents. And I did, with a little further research, find out where that 2,000 square foot came from. Actually, when they first came to us to assist them with the preparation of the site plan, that was back in January. The draft ordinance was already obviously moving forward. We couldn't make a formal submission until obviously after the ordinance was adopted in, I think it was April. Back in January, actually, the section of the ordinance had 2,000 square foot in place of the 4,000. So at some point it must have changed. So I thought that was a little interesting, but obviously it's 4,000 square feet as it's approved. So on the revised site plan, that will be amended.
Any questions of Mr. Robinson? I have one. Adult foster care facility. Typically, what kind of patient is in this facility?
I could defer that question to Ms. Goika, who's...
Would you have her come up, please? Yes. Your name, please?
Angelina.
Do you have a last name?
Angelina Goica.
Thank you. Typically, what kind of patient do you have in a foster care facility?
I do have female patient, elderly people.
Typically dementia type?
Yep.
Thank you. It's not a halfway house. Do you know what a halfway house is?
No.
A house where felons or criminals go sort of prior to being paroled and let loose?
No,
It's not one of those at all, is it?
no,
Thank you.
no.
Okay. This is a public hearing. If anyone wishes to address this to the commission, now is your time to come forward and give us your thoughts. Anyone want to do that? Come forward, sir. Mr. Robinson, you can sit down.
Hi, gentlemen. My name is David Barlow. I live right next to them. Angeli and Nick have been great neighbors for years. We've never had any problems with them. The elderly ladies that are there have always been extremely quiet. We rarely see them except for maybe taking one of the elderly ladies outside. But overall, it's been a very quiet facility. The only time it gets a little bit busy is Mother's Day. Overall, they've been great neighbors, and I would have nothing to complain about, and I can't see how this could not be approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions?
Apparently not. Anyone else?
What is your address?
2460 West Square Lake Road. The first photo
Yep.
shows my
See
property.
it.
2460, right next to them.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Your name, sir, and your address.
My name is Bill Weisgerber. I live at 2475 Charnwood. It's in the same block area. The buildings, I looked up on Zulu, and the building under discussion was built in 1956, and mine was built in 1955, and mine was built in 1956. They are similar buildings. My wife and I have lived in it comfortably. We've had company in it and been able to handle it. Presently, the living space, to me, is a problem. Not only that, but I must say that I do have experience with challenged people. I run a bingo for the St. Mary's resident women down in Detroit, so I'm familiar with the type of people we're talking about. And we have 6 people in there now, plus the 2 people who manage it, so at a dinner table, you have 8 people. It's at 8 people in our dining room. It's a challenge. It's a challenge, okay? My house has a bath and a half. Their house has 2 baths. I'm sure they have a problem managing 2 baths with 8 people. Now they're talking about doubling the size for the same amount of toilet facilities. I suggest that it not be approved because of the standard of living that this would cause for these kinds of people. And I don't think the state decided to take these type of people out of an institution and to put it and now start to build the mini institutions by taking a living area that's small for a small family and putting it into a large functioning organization with challenged people, not family people, but challenged people. With that, I recommend that you reconsider this.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to address us? Sir, come up.
Good evening, and thank you for your time. And
Please
not
tell us.
Larry English. I live at 6140 Beach Road, which is just around the corner from the house in question. And thank you for your time, gentlemen, regardless of your decision tonight. Appreciate your efforts, really do. I'm against the increase in the number of residents that could be in this house. I think 6 is fine. There's apparently been no issues. But going up to 9 plus 2 caregivers, or would there be additional caregivers? Total of 9.
Total residents would be 9.
Well, currently, there are...
The ordinance would permit up to 6 now, by right. There's only 5 bedrooms. The additional expansion brings it to 7, capacity for 7 residents.
Plus.
And also, just a point of clarification for the Planning Commission, there are 3 bathrooms in the facility, 3 full bathrooms in the facility.
Well, my objection stays the same. Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Anyone else? Seeing no one, I'll bring it back to the board. I'm going to take the privilege as chairman to make a comment first. My father passed away January this year at age 98. He was one of these people. He suffered from dementia. He was in an adult foster care facility in Lake Orion with 5 other dementia people. The youngest person in that home was probably 75. They had 2 caretakers there during the day. Doors were rigged so that they could not leave, even if they could figure out how to do it, but none of them could. If you were to go over there almost any time during the day, you would find probably 1 or 2 in their bedroom, 2 or 3 sitting on a couch staring at the floor. My father would be at the table reading the same paper all day, and every time he looked at it, it was a new page. They were a docile group. They were harmless. They wouldn't harm a fly. They didn't recognize me. Didn't recognize my brothers. They had wonderful care. And I can tell you, maybe I'm biased, but I think these foster care facilities are wonderful, wonderful facilities. We all come from a generation where we were the wonder generation, but now we're getting old. And there were no plans when we were young for taking care of old people. We've got to do it today. We are an old population. More of us are getting older than those coming on behind us. So I'm going to tell you, I think this is a wonderful facility, and I intend to vote for this. Now, my soap opera is done. Would anybody else like to make a comment? Any discussion on this? Mr. Sabanant.
I just want to clarify something. The standard for adult foster care facilities is, for this type, is a minimum site area of 4,000 square feet per adult, excluding employees or caregivers. My understanding is there are 6 adults here today, and if we move forward as proposed, there would be permitted 9 adults, essentially 9 consumers, clients, patients, whatever the term is. I just wanted to be clear on that. There's 6 there now, and they ultimately, if approved as written, there'll be 9.
Thank you. Anyone to comment? Are we ready for a resolution? Mr. Edmonds.
Be it therefore resolved that special use approval and preliminary site plan approval for the proposed adult foster care small group home located on the north side of Square Lake and east of Beach Road at 2420 West Square Lake, Section 6, within the R1A zoning district be granted subject to the following. 1, the maximum number of adult foster care residents shall be 9. Sheet 1 shall be corrected as per the recommendation of the report prepared by Carl Wortman Associates. Number 3, an opaque screen, fence, or landscaping shall be provided to obscure the trash storage area on the east facade.
Second.
Support by Mr. Stratt. Any discussion? Mr. Tagle.
Question. At first, I was under the understanding there would be a total of 9 occupants, but based on what Brent has clarified, is it 9 residents plus the 2 caregivers?
I believe that it's per resident, the actual residents, the people that live there, the actual foster care residents, not the employees. That's why the employees...
Plus, okay, then plus the caregivers. So there would be a total of 11?
There could conceivably, if you had 2 caregivers along with the 9 permanent residents, and I'm not sure, maybe the applicant can clarify if some of the rooms have more than 1 person in them, I don't know, but according to our ordinance, there would be a maximum permitted number of 9 residents. I'm sorry if when you said adults, we're talking about adult foster care residents on site.
Well, yeah, I would like a clarification because there are 7 bedrooms in the house, and I just would like to know, do the caregivers spend the evenings there, and do they take up one of the bedrooms, or does a caregiver take up one of the bedrooms? And so...
I don't know. We'd have to ask the applicant.
Well, I can tell you from my experience that there was 24-hour care in 3 shifts. The caretakers did not sleep there. They were awake and revolved. In my case, each one had a separate bedroom. Angelina? I'm sorry to call you by your first name. I've forgotten your last name. But of the bedrooms, will each resident have a separate room?
I have 2 bedrooms that they share.
Okay. Answer your question, Mr. Tago.
Okay, and the caregivers do not, the caregivers are...
No, up to 9 people. Now the caregivers sleep in, which is me. Up to 9 people, the caregiver will have shifts. No, but the caregiver will not sleep there.
Okay, thank you.
And just a point of clarification, just that's one of the differences between a family home and a small group home is that the family home is like an accessory use to a single family residence by definition, and the group home is not necessarily so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Tago, did you have another question?
No, okay, no, I'm fine, thanks.
Are we ready for a vote? Let's do it. Mr. Savinin.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
Mr. Stratt?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Altman?
Yes.
Mr. Edmonds?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Sanzika?
Yes. The resolution passes. Thank you. Mr. Schultz?
May I ask Mr. Motzny a question? If a subdivision has bylaws and restrictions, do those supersede our approvals and/or state law?
The private restrictions don't necessarily, I wouldn't say supersede, but private restrictions in a subdivision can be enforced even if they vary with the zoning ordinance provisions. And I think there actually is a case involving a group or a foster care home where the subdivision restrictions were upheld. So depending on the circumstances, the private subdivision restrictions can supersede the zoning ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just as a continuation, well, what about the state or federal laws? How does that impact the bylaws or the restrictions?
I can't answer on federal law with regard to foster care homes. My understanding is the subdivision restrictions can supersede the state law, though.
Okay, I'm not referring to foster care. I'm just talking in generalities.
You really would have to go on a case-by-case basis.
I see. Okay.
Okay. Item number 7 is public hearing and a special use request and preliminary site plan review. File number SU389, proposed Trainers Academy LLC, the north side of Maple, east of Crooks, 950 West Maple Road, Section 28, currently zoned MR, Maple Road District. Mr. Brannigan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a facility, a multi-tenant building on Maple Road, in the Maple Road District, in the Form-Based Code District, which clearly is going to result in some dimensional nonconformities. There are a couple of other nonconformities on the site I'll hit on through my report. The applicant is proposing a facility here on the site which, to our understanding, does not have overnight boarding. It's the Trainers Academy is an existing business in the community of Troy that's been around for 10 years and is well known throughout the dog care community. I had mentioned before that I had talked with the previous applicant. They actually mentioned Trainers Academy just today and had indicated that, oh yeah, it's a well-known established Troy business. And they are looking to relocate to this new facility in this existing tenant space that's currently vacant, as indicated on the plan above. The parcel overall is considerable. It's 3 acres in size. The facility is quite large. Even with this potential applicant going in, there would still be, a very large amount of vacant space within the building. I'm going to hit on parking calculations, and that would show that even though a new use would be going in, there's still sufficient parking on the site to accommodate any manner of additional uses that could go in here. But we're going to touch on a few things related to this particular application. Basically, what the applicant is proposing is to occupy the space kind of in the southeast corner of that building, the 950 building. And then you see there's a tiny little corner smidgen of landscaping there. There would be a covered pet relief area there with an opaque fencing surrounding it. So this is an area where a dog could be let out to relieve themselves. That area drains into a floor drain that is then connected back into the building to go to sanitary sewer. So there's no intermingling of pet waste with the storm sewer. It's covered, and everything is contained in that manner. That leads us to an issue with regards to compliance with the landscaping requirements of the zoning ordinance, which I'll hit on in a minute. But the solution that the applicant is proposing for the management of this care area is something we've discussed at length with some of the other dog daycare type facilities that we've had in the community, and our engineering department as well as the planning department feel that the design of what they have in mind is at least satisfactory in that regard, with separating storm and sanitary sewer, etc. There are a few dimensional requirements, as I mentioned, that are not compliant on the site. The build-to line clearly is not compliant. Side yard setback requirements, on the one side the dimension's not provided, but it's a 0-foot requirement anyway. The height requirement, you can have unlimited height in the Maple Road District, provided the building type you select is of unlimited height. We don't have any concern there. They're pretty close to the number with regard to lot coverage, but they're under, it's 29.2%. So consequently, there's no dimensional requirements that impact this project. Site access and circulation, as you can see, the site is accessed from 2 existing driveways off of Maple that are proposed to remain. Sidewalks. There is a sidewalk along Maple Road. There is not, however, any pedestrian connection between the building and Maple Road. So you'll note in my review, I mentioned the possibility of adding a sidewalk coming from Maple Road sidewalk back to the building there. And I'm sure that Mr. Sorensen from the applicant's engineering firm is going to be up to talk about this. We've talked about potential solutions for this, and it's our understanding there may be the possibility of connecting the building by a small sidewalk going through that landscape greenbelt area, and then striping or other indication across the parking area. So a pedestrian connection to the building is something we've noted there. The site plan indicates a total of 203 parking spaces, which includes 6 barrier-free. I've broken them down separately. Tenant 1 is a martial arts school. This is the Krav Maga facility. They've got 29 spaces. They require 29 spaces. Tenant 2, CRG Property Management, 300 square foot gross floor area per space. They need 32. Trainers Academy would require 28, which, just based on their square footage, again, my guess is the applicant's going to tell you that they wouldn't need 28 spaces when you look at the floor plan of what their facility is. However, even so, 28 spaces. Future to be determined, tenant 4, you've got 15,000 square feet there. If you were to just use the general number of 250, which covers our more intense uses, retail, shopping center type stuff, whatever, it would require 61 spaces. Add all those up, you still only get a requirement of 151 spaces, which is well under the 203 provided on site. No parking issues here. Natural resource impact, clearly none. Separate landscape plan was not provided as part of the application. However, existing limited landscaping is shown on the site plan. We've discussed landscaping with the applicant, and I'm sure we'll discuss it all further here today. Clearly, the site is not compliant with our 20% landscape open space requirement overall. However, it has been the City of Troy's practice over the years, as long as there's not an increase in that level of nonconformity with an application, we allow those uses to continue. They're not impacting the nonconformity, there's no big deal there. However, because we're adding 329 square feet of additional covered area, 329.3 covered area for that pet relief area, that's one of the only small landscaping areas on the site. Consequently, we're reducing it further. I know that it's a very small area, however, it increases the level of nonconformity according to the letter of the law in our ordinance. Consequently, in order to allow that condition to exist on the site plan, you would either need to obtain a variance to allow that to occur, or mitigate for that 329 square feet by providing it elsewhere. It has been our practice in the past to allow people to expand an existing landscaping area by a factor of, similar to what they're proposing to retreat it by, so that would be okay. The solution here could potentially be growing the landscaping island that is opposite the main entrance of the building there, expanding its width, something of that manner. The other requirements, when we have the ability to bring the site into compliance with the ordinance with simple plantings and things, we typically do that, especially in the case of a special land use. A couple of other landscaping requirements that the site plan is not compliant with is greenbelt trees. There are no greenbelt trees there. They would require 7. So anywhere, along that front greenbelt, or it's been our practice, between the parking lot, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in the 10-foot greenbelt, as long as it's in that section between the parking, the building, and the street would be okay. So that 200 feet would require 7 trees. Additionally, pardon me while I find my spot here in my review. There's a couple of other landscaping requirements. The new ordinance requires parking lot landscaping islands here and there. Like I said, there is a parking lot landscaping island. They're required to have a tree. There's no tree on this one. There's a possibility of expanding this one to accommodate the 329 square foot. Throwing a tree in there would be a good thing and bring it further into compliance with the ordinance. The last thing with regards to landscaping is that you have a requirement. Parking lots at front on a public roadway need to be screened by a landscape berm 3 feet in height along the perimeter of the road right away. However, the ordinance allows for alternative plantings and alternative treatments of that. Alternative landscape plantings or a solid wall not exceeding 3 feet can be approved. Specifically, it states where it's found that space limitations or visibility for vehicular circulation may prevent construction of a landscape berm. However, this is an occupancy of an existing site. They're moving into an existing tenant space. I believe that an alternative landscape treatment there, not necessarily doing heavy grading and knocking down, there's a big, large monument sign out there. We do want greenbelt trees. The only greenbelt space is this area here. Regrading that, adding the berm and all that, I think would be, I don't want to say an unreasonable request, but it would be a significant request. I think that the same desired effect could be achieved with a landscaping row there that would obscure the cars. So I would be perfectly happy accepting, as the ordinance states is permissible, an alternative landscape planting there to screen the headlights of the cars. So basically you're talking about a 3-foot hedgerow along the front there. It would be an improved condition. There are, in our observation of the site, we went out there today again and drove by. There are a few sites in the area that do happen to have a landscape berm, but a lot of them have absolutely nothing. I believe that this suggested alternative landscape treatment would be an improvement in the condition of the site, would bring the site largely into compliance with our landscaping requirements, and I would support such a treatment. So in short, there needs to be some sort of mitigation for the 329 square feet, a landscape treatment for the front of the parking spaces, and 7 greenbelt trees, and potentially a tree in the island or an expanded island if the islands were to change. The last couple of things, lighting. There is no photometric plan or any lighting details for the project. For final site plan approval, we would obtain that. Special use review. There are a couple of project-specific use requirements for commercial kennels, and they're as follows. We have in the new ordinance, as a result of some of the applications we saw the last few years, animal waste, biohazard materials, byproducts have to be disposed of, required by the health department, etc. No animal waste shall be buried, incinerated on site, or allowed to enter into groundwater. The applicant's treatment satisfies this requirement. Occupied distance from an occupied dwelling, they are not within the required distance from an occupied dwelling, so that's satisfied. Dog runs, exercise areas can't be located in any front yard screened with an opaque fence or wall at least 6 feet in height. That is satisfied. The only outdoor space is this relief area. The dogs would be inside other than that. Principal use activities other than outdoor dog runs, exercise areas conducted within a totally enclosed facility. Operations and housing of animals contained in one or more completely enclosed buildings. All those conditions are satisfied, so they meet all the minimum requirements for a commercial kennel facility. In terms of overall standards of approval, the first one, compatibility, the compatibility requirement. The use is proposed within an existing partially vacant building. No significant alterations other than this pet relief area. We do have a letter that was submitted to the city that we'll touch on in a minute, where the owner of the adjacent property had a concern about the appearance. However, our stated requirements are the wall, or the fence, opaque fence. They meet that. The proposed design of the indoor space, the measures being taken by the applicant, as well as the site's distance from residential areas, I believe will offset any potential negatives, and it's compatible. It is compatible with the master plan. It doesn't conflict with anything. This is our Maple Road District, which is a wide open door on terms of use. As long as they meet the special use requirements, it's compatible. Traffic impact, it has no additional impact from any other use permitted in the MR district. There's far more intense uses permitted in this district, so I believe that many permitted by right uses would actually have a greater traffic impact, so there's no impact there. Same with public services. In terms of compliance with zoning ordinance standards, they're all related to the landscaping requirements, and then there are existing nonconformities that can be maintained, as stated earlier. Impact on the overall environment, it's not going to have a detrimental impact to any degree higher than any other permitted use, especially given the sensitive treatment of pet wastes. And then all the specific use standards, as I noted above, have been met. I believe it's of such location and character to be compatible with the orderly development of the area. And the plans are sealed as required. Other than that, I have no additional comments.
Any questions for Mr. Brannigan? If not, is the petitioner present?
Right in review.
Good evening. My name is Steve Sorensen. I'm with Professional Engineering Associates. I'm representing Trainers Academy and their owner, Lisa Petrona. Trainers Academy, as Mr. Brannigan indicated, has been in business in Troy since 2000, and Lisa herself has been the owner of the business since 2005. She has been doing her part. As part of this special land use, she has made contact with all of her neighbors and distributed letters and stating her intentions. She also has letters here, if anybody would like to see them, from her current neighbors that are saying what a good neighbor she has been and a good business she has been on Troy Court in Troy for the last 10 years. Truth of the matter is she needs to expand. She needs more room. This offers her space within Troy, staying close to her client base, where she can offer, better service. As stated, I think everybody knows there's been quite a few of these pet projects through recently. I myself was involved directly with one, and we've spoken before. To compare this project to those projects, this is a much smaller scale as far as what is being proposed. The play areas for this project are completely contained within the building, and that will, the large play areas that everyone was concerned about, the dog waste, and the infiltration into the groundwater and the storm system is not a concern with this option. And, we have learned from those other facilities and have provided consistent with what was requested last time. And we've got a covered area solely for the relief of the dogs that drains directly into the sanitary system. And so I would hope that that meets your expectations. There's also been the required screening, as Zach had indicated. When we received the comments, I apologize that the landscape comments weren't addressed initially. It was a misunderstanding on our part. But I believe we met today with Brent and with Zach, and these are things that we can come to an agreement to and work out. And just sitting in a few minutes today in the meeting, we came up with some sketches that I believe were very agreeable to everyone in the room. And what I've got tonight is Lisa Petrona is here, and she, if you have any questions for her, she is the owner. And I also have Mark Cook, who is the owner of the property, who would be best to deal and talk with regarding some of the improvements, because they're improvements to his property, not to the tenant space. At this time, I think Mark would like to make a couple of words as well.
Come up, please.
Gentlemen, my name is Mark Cook. I am the landlord, owner of that building with my brother Jay. Could you go back to the one that's the aerial? Just received the landscape letter earlier this week. I presently own 1985 West Big Beaver, the Benihana building. We got special use from you guys for that, which allowed us to put in a jewelry store on the first floor. We have completely renovated that building. I think most of you are familiar with it and the quality of work that we do and that we do here in Troy. I am all in favor of the majority of the landscaping plans, the trees along the trees would be between the street and the sidewalk, correct? That's how the plan, the 7 trees?
They would be anywhere in that whole front landscaping area all the way up to the parking lot.
Okay, and I also like the idea, as you see, we do have an island that pokes out.
It's right in the center along the south line.
So that pokes out. Immediately in line with that is our monument sign. I like the idea that you've got of putting shrubs there up where the headlights won't come back and flash in the road. And I appreciate your consideration on the berm, because if you considered building a berm and then trying to put a sidewalk through it, you'd have retaining walls, which would probably cost as much as all the improvements you're talking about doing. My concern with adding the egress sidewalk from the sidewalk back up to the building and then creating a path is, I've got 2 curb cuts. On my 200 foot of frontage, I've got about 80 feet of open pavement already. The one curb that borders the Save-A-Lot guys is a really wide driveway. The other one's a 30-foot driveway. They're like 40 and 30, so that's 70 feet of my 200 feet is already egress. I understand if a man came in a wheelchair to go to the doggy daycare, he would not want to cut through the parking lot. I think the statistical odds of that happening are pretty infinitesimal. So what I'm requesting from you all is that I agree wholeheartedly with all the requests, but I think putting a sidewalk, bifurcating my existing island with the sidewalk is superfluous and unnecessary. Thank you, folks.
I love your adjectives. Anyone else wish to address us? Mr. Schultz?
If I could, to the property owner, we'd be more than happy to have you close one of those curb cuts on Maple Road. Right. Just thought. I have a question for staff and for the consultant.
Yes, go ahead.
Comment was made that there were some sketches done today. We have not been privy to any of that. Did any of those sketches include any landscaping around the proposed dog or animal relief area as requested by the owner of the building next door?
If I may comment, the owner next door is Gary. Excuse me, if I may comment, the owner next door is Ari Leibowitz, who is a friend of mine. He called me this week. I absolutely agreed to landscape that out the perimeter of that wall because he's got windows that face it. So, thank you. Thank you.
And to continue, looking at the drawings, on sheet P2, it shows a roughly 25 by 13 foot area for the animal enclosure, but on A1, which is the facades of the building, it shows the fence going all the way to the very south front edge of the building. I'm wondering which one we're actually going to get if we approve this.
I believe you have a drawing, an interior drawing, a site plan that shows that the fence doesn't come all the way to the front. There's offices, there's several offices with windows that are exposed. It's set back. I don't have a dimension, but it's set back.
I don't, if I can comment, I'm not sure, Mr. Schultz, are you talking about the, on sheet A1, which drawing do you believe shows the fence enclosure going to the edge of the building?
Lower left-hand corner.
It doesn't. You can see that it says existing building on both sides of the drawing of the enclosure. It does not show the south terminus of the building there, but there is a line extending.
Okay. Fine, thank you.
That was easy. If there are no more questions, this is a public hearing. I'll open up for a public hearing. Does anyone wish to address us on this request for special use approval and preliminary site plan? Seeing no one, I'll bring it back to the board.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Brannigan.
I just want to make a comment with regards to the, the applicant, once they got our concerns and sat down with us, have been very good. I feel very confident that the, the issues that are outstanding are something that can be very easily administratively held. If the Planning Commission is leaning towards an affirmative recommendation, I would be very pleased for it to be conditioned on satisfactory resolution of some of these issues rather than a postponement. Also, I wanted to note that the concept of the sidewalk going, the ordinance does not I will make it absolutely clear, the ordinance does not specifically require in all cases a sidewalk going from the building to the street. What it does say is that, in minimizing pedestrian conflicts and all that, in the interest of all those things, it's a desirable, effect, particularly with crossing parking lots. It's something that, you can actually achieve with, with striping and other techniques there. I just wanted to make that absolutely clear that that is not a formal requirement that anything should be held up on. And, I feel comfortable that, what the applicant is, or the owner, I should say, has indicated to us are, site.
I've got a question for Mr. Motsney. There's a great discussion regarding landscaping, which was not provided to us with Mr. Brannigan. Can we go ahead and approve a preliminary site plan without that before us?
I don't, as Mr. Brannigan indicated, I don't think there's anything that would prevent this board from making approval subject to meeting certain conditions. I think we could do that.
Can we do that administratively?
Yeah, I believe so.
Mr. Brannigan?
And also, I would say that, it was the applicant's understanding that, through whatever point of miscommunication may have been, that, that what they had provided did meet our minimum requirements. We accepted it as a site plan. The zoning administrator, in this case Brent, has the ability to accept it as a complete plan. I made my comments in there because, we felt there needed to be changes to the landscaping to make it compliant with the plan. The requirement for a landscaping plan doesn't necessarily always mean it has to be on a separate sheet. The site plan on here does show the existing landscaping. So, anyway, I just want to add that. Sounds like Brent wants to.
Okay.
Yeah, just to add, generally speaking, the Planning Commission, and rightfully so, when there's changes that are design revisions that are discussed at a meeting, the Planning Commission generally wants the petitioner to come back in a couple of weeks with the revisions, and I generally agree with that. Particularly for new construction, larger projects, given the fact that this is a reuse of an existing building, and what we're talking about is very minimal in scope. I'd be very comfortable with moving forward with a conditional approval and getting the revised drawings from the petitioner and not slowing down the process this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Schultz?
The landscape conversations that have been had, do they include the replacement of the X number of square feet that they're going to become more non-compliant?
That would be something that's even outside of the scope of the landscape materials requirement. That's compliance with an ordinance, a formal ordinance requirement. They could not move forward without satisfying that. So we would not, grant anything unless there was 329.3 additional square feet of landscaped area added to the site. So yes. And that was, I will say, in our discussion with the applicant's engineer, we had talked about, I'm not sure what design strategy he would actually use, but they could potentially grow that middle island and then possibly lose one of the suggestions Mr. Sorensen had indicated was maybe they could lose one of the spaces that are along the east boundary that are closest to the neighbor's windows there, the one that's closest to the pet relief area. And also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Mr. Schultz?
I don't know how popular I'm going to be. Would it be possible for us to take a 5-minute recess while Mr. Savinant and Mr. Brannigan put together the requirements to add to this resolution so that we're not writing a resolution with requirements here at the table as we're moving along?
Can you do it in 5 minutes, Brent?
Zach, can we do it in 5 minutes?
Yes.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, I'm over here.
Oh, Mr. Stratton.
Yeah, I'm in a peanut gallery. I had my hand up several times before Mr. Schultz, as a matter of fact. But anyhow, the thing I want to make comment on is, understanding the conditions out there, and certainly we want to expedite every project we can. I really have also heartburn with respect to the fact that there was not a seal on those drawings either. So that's another issue here, but I'm on the fence in terms of going along with it under the condition that they do seal the drawing administratively. But in the future, I really I have a problem with it.
It does require sealed drawings.
And Mr. Brady, sealed drawings were provided. I'm not sure what the...
No, not on the architectural portion.
What do you...
Not on this drawing here, I don't see it. I'm not seeing the seal on it.
Only the cover sheet was...
If it could please the council to know, I haven't authorized sealed interior drawings yet because that's a considerable expense, one of which I'm not willing to take until I know that I've got approval. Interior drawings. You've got the sealed drawings for the site approval. You've got site drawings in there, but my architectural...
Sir, is all architectural drawings shall also be sealed?
They will be sealed. I haven't...
That's part of the requirement that they be sealed when they're presented to us.
For site plan approval.
For site plan approval, yes, sir.
That was not my understanding.
Well,
I think Mr. Strantz had...
I didn't know.
That's
okay. And understand, guys, this is a building that was vacant for several years. We've bought it. We've put a ton of our dollars into it. No bank mortgages because banks aren't loaning money, FYI. And something like the sealed drawings, which are an additional $10,000 for this thing, to know that I was, as an owner, my dollars, 2 kids in college, that wasn't a risk I could take. I have to be fairly confident that this is going to work. And I, if you guys are businessmen, you understand. If you do, you don't. Thank you.
Sir, did you hear my comment as it relates to my sympathy on that? I'm on the fence on that.
Yeah, no, I'm just explaining. I'm just trying to explain my point.
Conditions.
Yeah. I appreciate that, but I'm trying to tell you where we're coming from too. It's it's difficult.
Well, we're not going to bend just because
I'm not saying you are. I'm just explaining.
Gentlemen, I think we understand your positions. The law is what it is.
I'm sorry. Can I?
Mr. Brannigan?
This issue keeps coming up. I need direction from the Planning Commission in this regard, and particularly from Mr. Stratt. Our ordinance requirement states flatly, drawings shall be sealed and signed by a state of Michigan professional engineer, licensed architect, registered landscape architect, or professional community planner. That's the only language that's in our ordinance with regard to the sign and seal. This application, which was submitted as a whole, was signed and sealed by a licensed professional engineer in the state of Michigan, Mr. Sorensen, who, for the entirety of this content, has signed and sealed it. So if we need, if we need our ordinance to say the architectural uprights need to be certified by an architect and the landscape plan needs to be certified, it does not say that right now. So and this is not an attack or anything, an aggression. I'm just saying I need a point of clarity, and if so, then we need to amend the ordinance to say.
So let me suggest, Mr. Brannigan, this is not a place to discuss the internal workings of this. If you have a concern, I suggest you address it to Mr. Motzney, the city attorney. Let them wrestle with this question. The Planning Commission is not going to tell you whether it should be sealed or not. Our attorneys will do that.
Okay, well then let me rephrase my point. It's not so much about that, but in my mind, and I said so in my letter, I believe that this site plan being stamped and sealed meets this ordinance requirement of number 16.
Right.
I'll limit my comment to that.
That's
I apologize for overstepping.
All right, we understand your opinion. Yeah. Mr. Schultz?
Can I go back to my question?
Yes. I guess the original question was...
Can we take a 5-minute recess and get an appropriate resolution with requirements prepared so that we're not, as planning commissioners, writing that?
You want to do that? All right, we will take 5 minutes. Let's reconvene, please.
They didn't give you a gavel, did they? Whack. Ooh, you got two choices.
Yes, sir.
Perfect.
I was trying to
I
nap.
find this a showing tradition.
I've heard that sound before.
Mr. Brannigan, do we have an addition to the resolution that Mr. Schultz can incorporate?
Yes.
Has he got it?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Schultz, the floor is yours.
Resolve the special use approval, am I on the right one? Yes. Resolve the special use approval and preliminary site plan approval for the proposed Trainers Academy LLC located on the north side of Maple Road, east of Crooks at 950 West Maple Road. Section 28 within the MR zoning district be granted to the, subject to the following. 1, add a 3-foot landscape hedge to screen the parking area from Maple Road. 2, add not less than 329.3 square feet of landscape area to mitigate the new outdoor relief area. 3, add 7 greenbelt trees within the existing greenbelt. And 4, add landscape screening to the outdoor enclosure to buffer the appearance of the proposed fence to the east.
Is there support? Mr. Sanzica. Discussion. Roll call, please, Brent.
Mr. Stratt.
Yes.
Mr. Tagle.
Yes.
Mr. Ullman.
Yes.
Mr. Edmonds.
Yes.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Mr. Sanzica.
Yes.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes.
Gentlemen, you have special use and site plan approval. Preliminary site plan
And
approval.
thank you for staying in Troy.
Yes.
Next item under other business is a sustainable development process. We've got a draft by Mr. Brannigan. Mr. Brannigan, do you want to address that for us?
The intention tonight is to not have a detailed discussion of this, but to introduce it to you and then give it to you to digest and absorb and bring back comments. And I want to solicit your input on a couple of items, and I'm going to talk about that now. I'll also provide this to you digitally, and Brent can distribute it to you digitally as well if you'd rather have it on your computer. I know some of you prefer to do that because this is your only copy. As you recall, the sustainable development process is something that we adopted in our ordinance with the intention of putting in the non-ordinance language document later that shows the administration of it. The way the ordinance was constructed, it gives us the ability to put this process in place, which the Planning Commission will adopt. And this is basically the rules and regulations for achieving one of those 7 areas of relief that we built into the ordinance. So these are the standards that we would use. So consider these kind of on par with, site and architectural design guidelines or the Big Beaver design manual that we adopted. That's kind of what this is. What this is a rule book for this Sustainable Design Review Committee, which is established by ordinance. This is a proposed rule book for them to make their determination that, yes, the sustainable design measures that are being proposed do offset those areas of relief. And that's how the ordinance was constructed. It said, if you do something to, for instance, offset the fact that you're adding parking in the front yard of an IB property, the Sustainable Design Review Committee can approve that. What standards did they use? That's what this document will hopefully show us. And with your additional input, I hope to have this, over the next, hopefully the next month, I would like to get this in a condition where we could accept it as a planning commission and begin using it. We do have some interest already in this option in the city. I'll walk you through some of the basic tenets of it without getting too detailed. And then what I would like you to do is take it home, read through it yourself, see if it makes sense to you. Frankly, if you read through it and there's some parts that are confusing for you, I want to know that because I want this to be understandable for anybody. The applicability of this, it's totally voluntary, as you know. What this does is it gives us some flexibility. Ultimately, what we would like to do is, if we have a successful process in place, we would like to add additional areas in the ordinance where maybe relief could be sought or modification could be sought to further incentivize sustainable development. That was the goal here with this element in the ordinance. So just to refresh your memory, there are 6 areas right now that the zoning ordinance allows this feature to be used. First of all is lot coverage. For projects having SDP status, lot coverage can be reduced in a bunch of the different zoning districts, and it's in each of the districts, so I've cited all the sections there. Front yard parking in the IB. Right now, IB doesn't allow front yard parking. You could conceivably do it if you followed this. one family cluster density bonus, and one family cluster dimensional modifications. We inserted sustainable design as one of the qualifying characteristics to achieve cluster status, because what you have to do to get that, as you know, is justify the cluster project. One of them would be that it's a pre-qualified SDP. The last two are landscaping flexibility. There's a lot of things built into this with regards to low-impact stormwater development, native plantings, water reuse reduction, et cetera. And so we felt that it was suitable to allow flexibility in terms of interpreting our landscaping section for the purposes of sustainable design. And then parking requirement deviations. The ordinance states that the Planning Commission has the ability to modify parking requirements with a parking study and all that. What this does is kind of front-loaded. If you're a pre-qualified SDP and you come in and show that you're going to make parking modifications and you're going to do some pre-qualified elements, and I'll show you how they do that, basically they become automatically eligible for the parking deviation when they go through site plan review. So it's kind of just sorting that issue out ahead of time. And we'll talk about that in a minute. In terms of the committee, it's 2 planning commissioners, and this is established by the ordinance, the adopted language in the ordinance. This is obviously just mimicked here. It's city engineer or designee, zoning administrator or designee, and city building official or designee, along with 2 appointed planning commissioners. And we can see that you would be appointing those 2 planning commissioners during your annual elections. So we're going to have our Sustainable Design Review Committee number 1 and number 2, and you could appoint those when you appoint your officers and your ZBA rep and all that kind of stuff. So naturally, we would need, once we adopt this, we'll have it on the agenda to do that night to appoint members to be on this committee. There's a half a page here with rules. They talk about votes, the limitation on terms, meeting of records and proceedings. This is language that is similar to our ZBA, so it's taken out of the ordinance. SDP procedures. Okay, so this is where some of the details I want you to look into are the application for SDP status. We can't obviously ask for an entire site plan here because there might be certain circumstances where SDP status would allow them to reoccupy the building or would allow them to do something, and they're not going to, fully invest in doing a site plan if they don't even know if the site is eligible for their use or whatever. So, and also we don't need that level of detail because what happens when the Sustainable Design Review Committee approves, I say approves lightly, what they're doing is pre-qualifying it as an SDP. So when it comes through the site plan review process, we can say the committee pre-qualified us as a sustainable development for the purpose of, for instance, lot coverage or landscaping modification. So it's you could kind of imagine when you're going through the site plan review process then, it's as if they have a variance on the site already that you're just taking into account. Well, normally we would require 20% landscaping, but they're a sustainable development, and the committee approved them to have only 15 because they're doing X, Y, and Z. They're pre-qualified for that. The Planning Commission doesn't rehash it. It's already approved. However, it's not formally approved until the final site plan is ratified the final site plan is approved, and whereby it's then no longer a pre-qualified sustainable development, it is a sustainable development under this section here. So it's ratified by the final site plan approval, and that's how it was conceived in the zoning ordinance. So the amount of information that we need in order to make a determination is what I believe is in that list there. One of the things you could look at is if you were on that committee, do you feel that that list of required information would be sufficient for you to make a determination? Basically what it says is, show us what the condition is and show us what you're doing to mitigate for that condition. Now, the way that the system is designed is, we had originally conceived of it as something of a point system, and it was kind of confusing, and one of the reasons that we delayed issuing this to you is because I didn't like that solution, and so I went back to the drawing board and came up with something different. What this does is, when Dick Carlisle got involved with this and he looked at it, he said, remember, anything that we ask people to do, there needs to be a reasonable relationship between what they are proposing to do and what they are proposing to not do, so to speak. So let's say you're not meeting the 20% landscape requirement because you have sustainable development review. Well, like dark sky lighting or heat island effect, whatever it is not going to necessarily, it has to be tied to that landscaping reduction. So what we did was we came up with a whole series of potential sustainable design measures that somebody could take, and I'll go through those very briefly in a second. And then there's a table, which I'll show you, the only table in here, table 1, it's on page 6. It shows A through G and these different areas where you can do these measures: stormwater, site selection, transportation, light pollution. And it shows certain measures are prerequisites. So if you want to do the lot coverage requirement, you have to meet the prerequisites. You have to do these areas. You can't just do something that's not related to it. So for instance, for lot coverage, you have to meet the stormwater quality and stormwater quantity. you have to meet the heat island effect reduction, and you have to do water-efficient landscaping. And there's details later in here on what those constitute. And then, so you have to meet those 4. Now, you could meet all 4 of those with like one design solution. For instance, if you did a big engineered wetland or a large rain garden, it could have the effect of meeting all 4 of those. One physical thing could do all of those. It could, you're doing native landscaping, you're taking care of runoff, quantity and quality, and you're also dealing with heat island effects. So it's not that they have to do 4 different things, you just have to meet the 4 requirements. In addition to the prerequisites, each measure has the prerequisites, you also have to do one additional qualifying measure, and this is where kind of the above and beyond part is, to make sure that, this is something that we really are getting something for the amount of relief that we're providing back to the applicant. These are still functionally related to, but they're kind of, we want it to be not extraordinary measures, but we want it to be an investment in terms of the site being more sustainable than it would be under, if everything was just status quo and you're trading tit for tat. We want it to be that and then a little bit better. That's the point. So there's a couple of other things. So in the case of lot coverage, for instance, you can get extra credit for if it's a brownfield site that you're redeveloping, or it's an existing site that you're redeveloping. You can also get additional credit for if you're reducing heat island, because you've got more landscaping area. Lot coverage, you're going to have less heat island effect. If you've got a more developed site, you've got heat island or light pollution. And anyway, they go from there. So it's a system of meeting 2 to 4 prerequisites for each measure, and then a qualifying factor. Now, where the committee comes in, because it's not necessarily so black and white, is that there are a lot of different ways, for you to improve stormwater quality on the site. And what we do after page 6 is we get into each of these individual areas. Stormwater, what's the purpose? We have a very detailed purpose or intent description of each of these. Why do we care about stormwater? This explains why. Basically, it mimics language we've adopted in the zoning ordinance and language we have in our master plan, et cetera. And then it talks about the 2 areas in the stormwater measures that you can do. So you've got quality and quantity. And then it lists, to receive this status, here are some things that you could possibly do. Rain gardens, swales, manufactured wetlands, green roofs, and it has a list of them. One of the things that you could do is say, hey, Zach, why didn't you include X on this list? I think this would also satisfy that. That kind of a discussion would be productive for Brent and I if you'd say, you didn't think about this. And it goes through all the different measures. You have stormwater, site selection, which is redevelopment and reuse, and then brownfield redevelopment. Those are pretty simple. It either is or it isn't. Transportation, there's transportation areas in here, so, with regard to front yard parking and stuff. Well, if you have alternative fuel vehicle facilities, for instance, if you're putting in a car charger, we might be willing to let you have a parking space in the front if one of them is a car charger for, or something along those lines. That's a potential area. Or maybe even less. This is something they do successfully in Chicago, for instance, is installing priority parking for hybrid or alternative fuel vehicles for not less than 5% of the provided parking spaces. That comes from LEED. You'll see a lot of LEED certified projects have, they got their 10 barrier-free spaces, and the next 2 are for hybrids, which I personally would love if every site in Troy had that. But and then commuter accommodations is another one. Maybe that doesn't work for you, but maybe you could put in a better shelter or a place for people to park their bikes in a sheltered area, provide showers for employees, that kind of a thing. Just a couple more. Light pollution. We talk a lot about light here. This would require, sort of extraordinary measures with regard to your site lighting to achieve that effect. You can have basically dark skies type lighting. Reduce provided lighting by using automatic devices, et cetera, and then limitations on evening lighting and that are in here. Heat islands, for those of you not familiar, just, the urban heat island, when you've got a site that's fully developed, it reflects a lot of heat, raises the overall temperature, requires more air conditioning, et cetera. There's a lot of different things you can do to reduce heat island effect. One is have a highly reflective roof surface, a high SRI index roof surface it's called. You can have a lot more landscaping on your site to obscure parking or hardscape areas that would be reflective. They're sort of listed out here. You can put in solar panels. They suck up, they suck up reflected heat. And then water resources being the next. Water resources is, groundwater protection through things like water efficient landscaping, water use reduction, which could be a reduction of water consumption for your actual building. This is aerators, low flow toilets, low flow shower heads, things of that nature. If you can demonstrate, like in LEED, you're meeting, a 20% reduction over what the standard would be, and you can demonstrate that, then you could possibly meet that requirement. And then the last one is renewables. There's a few areas where renewables might come into play as particularly a qualifying measure, sort of the icing on top thing. If you want to put wind capacity, geothermal, or solar on your site, you could get that could be your qualifying factor above and beyond. So That is it. There's a couple of other things that I am going to ultimately add to this document. We discussed, Mr. Stratt brought up at the last meeting, he said, well, are we going to have definitions in here? And at the time I thought, well, I don't know, there's a lot of different, my rain garden, your rain garden, I don't know, I talked it over with Dick and we thought about it a lot more. I think it makes sense to have definitions in this document more. The more I thought about it and the more I discussed it with Dick, I think it's better to have definitions in here to give this committee more consideration. So while they're not in this draft yet, I am going to develop, for all the low-hanging fruit, I'm going to continue to develop definitions for the next version you see, but also I would like you guys, as you go through it, to maybe highlight the terms that you think should be defined and say like, well, in addition to things like, swale, rain garden, those kind of things. If there's anything in here that you think should be defined, please feel free to circle it or let us know. That would be great. Also, we'll probably provide some graphics in here. We have some existing graphics already as a result of our Big Beaver Design Guidelines. It's got, real good description of the rain garden situation and swales and that. We could include those or at least reference them in this document, I think. And we've got some other things in the city's ordinance and elsewhere that we can refer to. And then, like I said, any other measures or solutions, if you think that there's a solution for a heat island effect that's not in here, you think there's a solution for alternative transportation that's not reflected in here, please feel free to say, hey, Zach, what about if we said if they had, X number of, whatever, then, could that count? And we could discuss that. Ideally, it would be great if, you had over the next couple of weeks and maybe provide your comments at the workshop meeting in 2 weeks, and then I could come back at the next regular meeting with a revised draft a month from today that would incorporate all those things and incorporate some of your input. So we would at least be, in 30 days, we'd have a more well-formulated draft that could potentially be ready for adoption. And obviously, if you have any specific questions about the process, we'd like those to be brought to our attention as well.
Good, thank you. In a couple of weeks then, we'll get a report.
If you want to meet with us separately ahead of time, or if you want to talk about it, obviously, as always, you can call me or email me or provide your comments in writing ahead of the meeting. That would be fine too, whatever you're comfortable with.
Good. The second and last item is public comments. Is there anybody in the room who would like to comment on items on the agenda tonight? Seeing no one, at least volunteering to step up. Go to Planning Commission comments. Let's start with Mr. Sanzika.
Yes, I sent a note to Brent that Kelly, my wife Kelly, would be happy to give a presentation on Stormwater Management 101 at the next study session, or at any study session, if you so wish. So Kelly is a civil engineer. She has her master's in civil engineering from Virginia Tech, and she did a thesis on stormwater management, and she is the director of at the Department of Environment for Wayne County, so she's very well qualified. And I think what she would like to talk about is some of the things that they're doing at Wayne County, and to give an overview of their ordinance and what they've done. And they've done a lot of work on it, and I think you'd be impressed to see what they're doing.
Oh, good. We're talking about rain gardens and swales.
Absolutely.
And really helps.
Absolutely. So I leave it up to Brent and you, Mr. Chairman, when and if you'd like her to do it, but she's offered to give a presentation. And if you'd like to invite whoever you'd like to invite, the ZBA or the engineering department, I'm sure they would be welcome to attend.
Okay. Mr. Stratt.
Yeah, I have a couple items I wanted to talk about. One is, I'm not sure, but there's a gas station that is on the corner of Maple and John R. on the southwest corner. Mm-hmm. And right now they're going through quite a renovation on that. Now, I recall it coming before us, but not with specific drawings or anything, and they came in for a review. This reminds me of the same situation that happened, Mr. Schultz, you probably remember that, with the Red Wagon. They completely renovated that, and we didn't have an opportunity to actually review it, a whole new use, and we could have asked for some additional landscaping and all the rest of the stuff and mandated it. But it went through the building department, and I'm just wondering, I don't know if you have any comment that you'd like to make on that, Brent. I don't know what's involved.
It's not a whole new use. It was a gas station. It's a gas station. It's not a whole new use.
No, I'm talking about Red Wagon.
Oh, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not prepared to talk about the, I don't know.
I think what they're doing is they took out all the bays as a service station, and now they're making it a 7-Eleven.
They essentially expanded the interior by, they replaced,
So that it's...
they replaced bays with additional convenience, basically, and it's still a gas station, so the use hasn't changed.
Okay. Do we have any limitations as to how much modifications can be done without coming before us or anything
Well,
like that?
It's a case-by-case basis. I mean, that's the simple answer. I mean, what do you think? Go ahead, Zach.
I would say, yes, we do have standards. The zoning ordinance does provide things that require the site plan review process to go through. And one of the things that's typically exempted is the reoccupation of an existing use for the same use. And I don't know any specifics with regards to this, but yes, the ordinance does have standards with regards to what triggers them to come back here. So standards do exist for that.
Yeah, because it was vacant and it was abandoned. And now they're renovating it and they're reusing it. And we had a similar situation and I think the chairman was on the ZBA at that time, where we had the building that's just, I forgot the name of the building, just south of, or just across the street from Home Depot. What's the name of that? The stone place.
It's a stone, but I don't know what the name is.
Yeah. And they got variances, and what they did was they pleaded the fact that they were renovating and using the existing building. And what they did is they tore the whole building down with the exception of one wall. And because it was a renovation, they got all the variances and everything else. That's not right, in my opinion.
I would hesitate to, I don't like to use the word abandoned, because I don't think it was abandoned. It was vacant but not abandoned, in my opinion. And it was a gas station, and it still is a gas station. So I understand you using that previous across from Home Depot is something that you were uncomfortable with, but I would hesitate to compare it to this because it was a gas station and it still is a gas station.
Well, I'll tell you, they've got all the tanks up. I saw them excavating. They're excavating the tanks underground. I mean, they're really doing a major renovation, I think. And I know that they're doing a major renovation on the outside. It's all block and everything. But I just thought I would comment on it. I don't know if there's, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we shouldn't be worried about that.
Well, in this instance, they're actually eliminating a curb cut, so they're eliminating one of the curb cuts, and they're reducing the number of pumps on the sites. It's actually a decrease in intensity. So they're reusing a previously vacant site as was used previously, and they're actually reducing the intensity by eliminating a curb cut and eliminating pumps.
Okay, so you're aware of that. I didn't know that you were aware of it. Okay, I'm sorry then. That was the one thing I wanted to bring up. I forgot the other item.
The seal? We can pass on that, Mr. Chair.
Oh, yeah, I know what I wanted to mention. And maybe I think that Mr. Tegel probably would chime in if he wishes, but actually, the sealing of a drawing, actually the key thing is you can have an automotive engineer, as long as he's an engineer, seal the architectural drawings by law. That's okay. The liability factor is what we're concerned with. The thing that I have concern with is I was appointed by the state to be on the state review for all building officials, and what criteria they go by and what they do as it relates to the codes. And we just got through going through quite a series. The whole thing is that seal, whoever seals that drawing, the building officials do not review the drawings to the extent they do for residential with a builder. The architect or whoever is sealing the drawing is assuming a lot of liability factors and the responsibilities of that. And that's the whole key behind that. We're trying to protect life, limb, and property. And technically, yeah, we as long as there's a seal on the drawing, but we say that we want a seal. Now, it could be even a landscape architect cannot, but as you pointed out, what was it, planner?
Yeah, our ordinance would accept a landscape architect. It would accept a landscape architect,
I don't think they get a seal. I don't think they have registration, do they? Do they?
We researched the...
I don't know, maybe John knows better than I do. I don't know. But that's my understanding, right, John? Or do you have anything to say on that?
My thought, Tom, was that really state law defines what the responsibilities are and what an architect and engineer can do. And yes, landscape architects are a licensed group. Maybe what our ordinance should do is be guided by what state law says. I think to your point, when we talk about building construction, there are certain components of building construction that engineers are qualified to seal, and there are certain components that they're not qualified to seal. Now, we're getting into the point of, who's qualified to do what. And again, I don't know how far we go with this, because our review is not at the point of actually building construction. Our point is for building permits. Ours is for a site plan review. So, again, I appreciate what you're saying, Tom, and I think what saddens me when I see some of the stuff comes through here, whether it's, I look at these drawings and the quality of the design, and it's like, either an engineer did it, because they don't have any, sorry, Phil.
I understand.
You're going to talk to me out in the parking lot about this after.
Hey, slap yourself on the face. Go ahead.
Or the fact that again, my concern here is, and we've tried to reinforce this with our new ordinances, is design is important. We're trying to raise the bar here in Troy so that we don't get a continuation of a bunch of bad-looking buildings, bad-looking structures. I didn't say anything about this particular project because it's a little bump on the side of a building, but it's just...
That's why I qualified what I did. Yeah. And I agree with you, John, but also you know as well as I do, there are a lot of bad architects out there too.
Absolutely.
I never realized how bad some of these guys are until I got on this board. And I see some of the bad architects that are out there. But anyway, that's my point. I just wanted to make clarification. I'm very well aware of what the law reads on that issue, and unfortunately, the automotive engineers have a very strong hold on the legislature, and we can't change it. We're having some difficulties on that. Right now, there's a continuing ed that we've got in other states. All my other states, I have them registered in 7 states. They're all required for continuing ed except for Michigan. Michigan's going to adopt it finally. But it's the automotive engineers that really are the stronghold. There's a lot of them out there, more so than us. Sorry, I'm on my soapbox.
Okay, Mr. Edmonds.
Yes, I really appreciate Mr. Senzika and Mr. Savinet working together to get this stormwater management educational group together. And I would also strongly urge that we get invitations out to the ZBA and the engineering department as quickly as possible. Perhaps we could hold this meeting in the downstairs conference room, which would accommodate that larger group. Second item, we've talked about that the sign ordinance was going to be coming up next, and I just wondered what the timetable is for that type of effort.
It's a priority along with this. I'll have to get back to you on exactly. Our intention is to get in front of you as soon as possible. We're moving forward. We're very busy with...
And what is the current chapter of the sign ordinance? That's chapter
85.
85? Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Ullman?
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Schultz?
Nothing.
I have nothing.
Nothing from me.
Up to you, John.
One quick one. The document you just gave us tonight, was there a model out there that you used as a basis for this, or is this all new stuff?
This is, well, I would say that you'll see that there's some specifics in there in terms of no more than 20% of whatever. That, it came from the base lead standards. Some of them did.
Okay, thanks.
Greg, any comments?
Just reminder, I sent an email out regarding June 20th, the City Council meeting, recognition to the Planning Commission for the work, as well as staff and consultant for the work on the master plan and the zoning ordinance at 7:30 p.m. here. And just real general, this is a pretty cutting-edge document that we're working on here, this STP. This is one of the priorities along with the sign ordinance, as Mr. Evans indicated. We've had some potential applicants talk about this already, and they're waiting for this. This is priority, 1A. And the sign ordinance is 1A, subsection 1. It's right behind it. This is really cool. It encourages sustainability and also allows for flexibility. So it's a pretty neat document and pretty forward-thinking. And I can't think of another community that's got anything remotely similar to this. It's pretty neat. But anyway, that's my comments.
Mr. Metzny?
No comments, thanks.
Let me get to Mr. Brannigan, and then we'll come back to you, Mr. Schultz. Mr. Brannigan?
Much appreciate the comments about the SDP from Brent and the sign ordinance from Mr. Edmonds. We have been, and I will just, it's not just lip service. The department has been extraordinarily busy in terms of just day-to-day operation. Lots of interest, lots of things going on. Today we had 4 meetings back to back, and crammed a site visit in there. So you can get an idea for what our daily volume is like, and I believe that a lot of these are going to result in applications. They're not all yet. A lot of them are in the pre-application phase with some things coming down the pipe. So one of the other things we've been trying to do is to make standard note of the progress of existing projects or projects we approve and really get out there and see how things are doing. So, I talked to you a couple ahead of time that I had visited the Berkshire, for instance, just today, and was pleased to find it. And after all the ups and downs with that facility and the review, what an exceptional facility that actually become. And I was laughing with some of the members because I had walked in and, remember the applicant was Rita. She saw me coming through the door and was like, oh, what are you doing here? But, she was happy when I just was checking the place out, and it was well executed. And along with some of the other things we've approved in the last year, I really am excited about the SDP. I really hope that you tear into it and give us some additional input, because I think it's going to result in a first step towards some really neat things. And I don't know, I'm very encouraged about some of the things that are happening in Troy. It's funny because we were so busy with the zoning ordinance, and then, I thought things were going to taper off, but it seems to be coinciding. The ending of the zoning ordinance seems to be coinciding with just a lot of action in the department. And so we're going to stay busy, and it's a good thing.
Mr. Schultz, you've got the last word.
I'm sure it's already been taken care of, but in case it hasn't, it might be nice to invite Mr. Vleck back for next Monday night, since he was a major proponent and participant in both of those documents.
I will say Mr. Vleck has already accepted the invitation, and we also invited Mr. Wright, Mr. Littman, and Ms. Troshinsky, who are involved in some capacity with the master plan.
We're going to have one of our councilmen step down and be with us?
That's possible. She was a very integral part of the whole thing.
She was, yeah. Okay. Meeting's adjourned.